Welcome to The Line. This week there was a tragic shooting at a public library in Clovis, New Mexico. Two library employees, Wanda Walters and Christina Carter, were regrettably killed and 4 others were wounded. The shooter was a 16-year-old who some media outlets report was struggling at school. Our Line panelists are ready to talk about some of the issues that have been on our minds since we learned of the shooting. I'm joined at the table by Tom Garrity from the Garrity Group PR. Sophie Martin's here. She's an attorney and editor of DukeCityFix.com. Marcia Garcia, Strategies 360, she's with us, and Giovanna Rossi, president of Collective Action Strategies LLC, director of Family Friendly New Mexico, and host of the Well Woman Show on KUNM. Now, Tom, librarians interact with lots of people, and this is the part that spooks me when I think about this. I'm trying to think of how many public servants we have that have such a sweep of humanity coming through their place so often, and I don't know how one, stops a tragedy like this. But what was your, when you hear something so close to home after we've had so many tragedies around the country, what was your first thoughts when you heard about the Clovis shooting?
I was just like, what?
Right.
I can't believe this. It was a lot of shock, disbelief. You hear about it in other places as still just as tragic when it's in your same state.
That's right.
In a place that we do business in Clovis. Haven't done some in a little bit, but am very familiar with the area. And it's a wake up call. And you think as we're learning more details of the events that transpired with the suspect coming out of the bathroom,
right?
And just that premeditation. I mean, there's so many questions I know we'll explore and stuff. But to me, I was just dumbfounded. It was just heart was broken, and it was mind numbing.
That's right. Marcia's 16. It just grabs you, just the idea of a 16-year-old who we can't take a guess for this young man certainly, but something needed to be. An intervention of some sort needed to happen, and there's been reports that he had sought some sort of help. We don't know the details, it just didn't quite happen. How do we help people that are struggling this close to the edge? That's the part that really kind of gets me. What do we do for folks who really are that close to the edge of something?
Well, I think that a lot of this is, really the community really, when we talk about, it takes a village to raise a child. I mean, I think that sometimes maybe we can all do a little bit better to pay closer attention to the young people or to just people around us.
Right.
Sometimes all it takes is, a friend of a family or a neighbor or a teacher. But the other thing too is that people are really good at being chameleons,
Right. That's right.
And so, I read an article that said, the young man was just at church the day before and seemed fine,
Right.
So absolutely we need to do better as a society. But I think we also need to really look at the fact that there are times where we can do more for people in very tangible ways when it comes to supporting behavioral health for our young people, for adults, just for anyone that's suffering. We've had such an upheaval in our behavioral health system here in New Mexico. So it worries me, are we gonna hear more about tragedies like these happening?
Right.
And it's truly a shock to the system, like Tom was saying. I mean, this is truly heartbreaking. I mean, one of the first things I thought about was, which of my friends live there? Which of my friends are stationed right outside of Clovis? Who do I need to call to make sure that they're okay? Could they have been in that library? So it's just one of those things where we've really got to take a look at ourselves as a community, as a society, as New Mexicans, and really try to figure out what can we do to do better.
That's a good point. The Las Cruces Sun News, Sophie, was reporting that the young man told investigators he wanted to target his high school for a long time because he was, quote, from the young man, mad at everyone since he got kicked out of school last year, and he felt like no one liked him. That's a difficulty. That's a hard one to read and hear.
It's a very difficult thing to hear. I think it's important to remember that he is at an age where mental health issues often first emerge. And diagnosis and treatment at that point is incredibly important. And to Marcia's point about the gap in programs that we have here in New Mexico, I think in part because of the issues with the behavioral health system and how our state government handled that, but also just in that we as a country and as a state perhaps are not investing enough in those resources. The other thing I think we have to bring up at this table is the access to guns.
Yes.
There were a number of guns in that household. The reporting at this point is unclear as to whether they were locked up or not, but I will tell you as a former child, there were very few locks I couldn't get through.
Good point.
And there was, I believe there was an AK found in the house. There were a number of handguns and quite a lot of ammo. And, you know, I think, what is the saying? Every gun owner is a responsible gun owner until they're not. This really strikes me as one of those situations. This child had access to, reportedly to quite a bit of firepower. And we have to continue that conversation about how we protect our communities from guns. And that includes, you know, from the gun that is most often used against a member of a household is a household gun.
That's right.
Kids are not accessing guns necessarily they find in the streets. They're accessing guns that they find in their homes.
Yep.
And we are just not doing enough on that line either.
That's a point about locking up your weapons. That's a big personal one for me right there. You know, he was a church-going kid too, Giovanna. That's, you know, it's interesting how one cannot profile people in this world sometimes because there's really, it's not a movie. No one walks down the street screaming and yelling their head off like, I'm going to do something, come stop me. It's hard to assess. And his pastor was involved with his life, and the kid was clearly troubled, but the idea that at some point you have to be able to walk in and sit down and be able to talk to somebody. If it wasn't your pastor, who can it be in society? You see what I'm getting at here? That's a difficulty.
Well, we know from research that kids who are troubled, teenagers who are troubled and attempt suicide or are thinking about it or talk about it with someone, that there are some indicators for that, and that includes relationship problems, problems at school, and you know, mental health issues. And so I think it's a partnership with the schools and with the community, as Marcia said, and you know, this come up already, for the community to really be involved and listen for those things. And we definitely need more access to behavioral health services for teens, and we need on-site services. So that means school-based health centers where the teen can go in. And also, it really takes having a caring adult in your you know, in your life that's not your parent. So having a teacher or someone who's looking out for those signs, and that they can be small signs, but they need to be followed up on clearly.
You just, you know, you touched on the fact that we've heard it, I think, a couple times now, that he'd been going to church, he'd been speaking with his pastor. That is not the same thing. We really can't rely on our houses of worship. We can't rely on people whose job it is, you know, yes, the pastor's job is to provide some level of counseling, but this is not the same as a trained mental health professional. It's asking too much, if you ask me, of our churches. And unfortunately, we're in an environment in which politically a lot is like, well, you know, the churches will take care of it, nonprofits will take care of it, et cetera. The fact that this kid was going to church, the fact that he was talking to pastor, I don't see any relationship between that, and therefore it's a big surprise. I don't think it causes someone to act in this way. I just think it's not the type of service that a kid in that situation, that's not enough.
That's right.
Does that
makes sense?
Yeah.
Absolutely makes sense. And Tom, picking up on that, again, you know, to Sophie's point, the pastor can only sit with the kid for so long during the day. You can't, you know, overwatch the child, and at some point professionals have to be in the mix. And how do we pay for all that? That's a difficulty.
Well, I mean, he was in a public school system.
That's right.
So, you know, there's a lot of different checks and balances here. I'm going to go out on a limb here.
Please.
On a just kind of when I heard about this and I had a chance to think about it a little bit more, you have to wonder just statewide how confident we are as a public in our behavioral health system. And here's the reason behind it is that, you know, a lot of our talk around the table has really been on the behavioral health system and all of the changes. And that's just at this level. At the grassroots level, you know, when you start getting out of Albuquerque, you have different communities that really rely upon behavioral health services. And if all of a sudden those behavioral health services are, you know, yanked, there's a lack of confidence that people have in saying, you know what, you should go down to XYZ and talk to a counselor, because they don't have confidence that it's really going to be that it's going to be helpful because people want to be helpful. So I almost have to wonder if all of the turmoil has provided an undertone for people not to have that conversation. But regardless, people need to have the conversations, and I think it's just as simple that we need to put these things down and really engage more in face-to-face conversations.
That's right.
And check out a Facebook page and see if they're really not doing well, but really sit down with a youth and their friends and just say, hey, what's going on? Because I don't think we have enough grassroots, roll up our sleeves kind of conversations like we used to have before our society got so digital.
Can
point
I just
there.
weigh in on
Please,
that?
absolutely,
Because
Giovanna.
I think there's some broader issues as well. I mean, we can definitely talk about the behavioral health system and access to services for sure. But we also need to see this as a public health issue. And so taking the long view, taking a bigger picture look at the gun violence and deaths due to violence, we know that federal public health research can impact lowering the number of deaths due to violence. We've seen that. Unfortunately, we're not looking at gun violence in the same way. We're not treating gun violence as a public health issue. And so if we did that, then we would have public health solutions. And when we have public health solutions, we come up with all kinds of really awesome, interesting things that work based on research, but we haven't been able to do that because of politics.
That's a good point. He had been kicked out of school for getting in a fight in the version, I've read a couple different versions, but it was a triggering event, clearly. And the point of that is sometimes getting to know a kid before that triggering event happens, to understand how any event could be a problem for that child. That's the trick of it, and I think that's what you're getting at with public health, because that's part of that idea that you get in front of issues, not react, but you find ways to have solutions on the front end of a situation. So yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, can I give another
Please,
example?
absolutely.
So with other public health issues that where we have deaths happening, like car accidents and smoking and sudden infant death syndrome, we apply the public health lens. We say, what's going on here? We try different policies. We do research. We follow up. We have interventions, and we see a reduction in deaths in those areas. We haven't done that with gun violence because of, for over 20 years now, we haven't been able to fund the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, that does all the public health research in our country. We have not been able to fund them to do gun research because they are prohibited in the funding bill from doing anything that, quote, promotes or advocates for gun control. And this was something that was written into an amendment, the Dickey Amendment in 1996, that really has prevented us from moving forward in this issue. And we're not talking about, trying to come up with ways to take your guns away. We are talking about coming up with solutions, public health solutions, making guns safer, making homes safer, giving, having more interventions and services for teens who have access to guns who are suicidal. There are things we can be doing.
I'm glad you got that last point in. That was very important. I'll have to end it there, and condolences to everybody in the Clovis community. Now, when we come back to the line, we'll talk about ramping up energy production in New Mexico.